The forest floor trembled under the weight of a predator whose name would echo through time. Shadows bent as it moved with silent power, its keen eyes fixed on unseen prey. This was no ordinary beast, but a ruler of ancient lands. The Gorgosaurus carried strength in every step and hunger in every breath. Where it walked, fear followed. Where it hunted, silence broke. Life in its path had one choice: run or perish. In this world, survival was fragile, and one hunter reigned above all others. The age of Gorgosaurus had begun. The earth was young yet ancient. The world that stretched across endless plains and thick forests pulsed with life. Heat from the sun pressed down on every leaf and stone. Winds carried the scent of damp soil and the faint metallic trace of storms forming far beyond the horizon. Rivers coiled like silver serpents through the land, feeding lakes that shimmered beneath the light of the sky. Herds of horned dinosaurs gathered at the edges of those waters, stamping the ground with hundreds of heavy feet. Above them, flocks of flying reptiles wheeled in slow spirals, their wings stretched like sails against the sun. This was the age of giants. The age when survival was dictated not by tools or fire, but by tooth and claw. Among these creatures, one stood apart: the Gorgosaurus. Its name would be given long after its bones were lifted from stone, yet its rule began in this moment, in the wild heart of the late Cretaceous. The Gorgosaurus was sleek, where some predators were heavy. It was long-limbed and swift. Its skull carried rows of curved teeth sharp, as daggers built not only to tear flesh, but to crush bone. Each step was measured and heavy, but its body moved with an ease that seemed to defy its size. It was power wrapped in precision, its vision keen, and its instincts honed across generations of relentless struggle. The forest shifted as it passed. Smaller reptiles skittered through ferns to avoid its shadow. Mammals no larger than a hand darted into burrows. Even young hadrosaurs grazing near the river stirred in nervous waves, sensing the change in the air. They did not yet see the hunter, but they knew it was near. The land remembered predators, and carried their warning like a pulse that reached all who lived within it. To the west lay open plains where herds traveled in search of new growth. To the east rose broken ridges carved by wind and time. Between them the forest was a living maze of trunks, vines, and leaves thick with the hum of insects and the calls of creatures hidden in the canopy. Here the Gorgosaurus thrived. It was a creature of shadow and speed. It could wait motionless for hours and surge forward with a burst of violence that ended in silence and blood. Yet the hunter was not alone in its rule. Other predators moved across the land. Dromaeosaurs hunted in coordinated packs, weaving among trees with lethal precision. Crocodiles lingered near rivers with jaws that could snap bone in an instant. Even the mighty Daspletosaurus claimed territory not far from these forests. Each of them a rival, each of them a danger. The balance was fragile. A single mistake could turn hunter into prey. On this day, the Gorgosaurus stalked the edge of the river. It moved low, its head tilted slightly forward, nostrils flaring, as it drew in the scent of life carried by the wind. Hadrosaurs clustered at the bank, lowering their beaked mouths into the water. Their tails swayed in rhythm, and their eyes darted back and forth with constant tension. They were prey, but they were not defenseless. Their size and their numbers could drive back even a predator as skilled as this. The Gorgosaurus knew this instinctively. It did not rush. It measured. It watched. A dragonfly skimmed across the water. Frogs croaked among reeds. The hum of cicadas thickened the air. All of it was part of the song that had played for millions of years. Yet beneath the surface tension grew. Muscles tightened. Breath slowed. The hunter waited. The sun fell low in the sky, casting long shadows across the water. The herd shifted position, moving toward new feeding ground. It was in this moment of motion that weakness showed. A young hadrosaur limped slightly, favoring one leg. The Gorgosaurus' eyes fixed on it. Every fiber of its body sharpened with intent. This was the law of the land. The weak and the slow were chosen. But the strike did not come. Not yet. The predator stepped back into deeper shade. It would wait until darkness stretched across the river. It would wait until noise covered the thunder of its feet. Patience was survival. Recklessness was death. As night approached, other sounds joined the air. Calls of distant pterosaurs echoed above. The croak of giant amphibians rumbled near the water. Insects swarmed thick enough to form moving clouds. The forest grew darker until only thin streaks of light cut through the canopy. Eyes glowed in the shadows. Life never slept but shifted. The Gorgosaurus moved with it, its breath slow, its body pressed against the rhythm of the night. The land itself seemed alive. Volcanoes far to the south sent faint smoke drifting into the upper sky. Storms brewed over the plains with thunder that rolled like the march of giants. The earth trembled from time to time, as if reminding every creature that it too was a power beyond control. Against this backdrop of chaos and creation survival was an endless struggle. The Gorgosaurus was not a monster in this world. It was a necessity. It shaped the herds by culling the weak. It gave balance by keeping life from overrunning its own resources. To the eyes of the future, it would be seen as fearsome as merciless. But here it was a thread in the weave of existence, no more cruel than the river that drowned the unwary or the storm that tore through forests. It was life embodied in muscle teeth and instinct, and so the night deepened. The hunter moved along the bank, leaving barely a ripple in the undergrowth. Somewhere ahead the herd settled in a wide, clearing their forms dark shapes against the stars. The young limped once more. The Gorgosaurus lowered its head. The time of patience was nearly over. The hunt was about to begin. The clearing ahead breathed with life, yet the herd carried unease. The young hadrosaur with its limp struggled to keep pace with its kin. Its calls were faint, its body pressed against a group for protection. Around it adults shifted, forming a loose wall of muscle and horn. Their tails swept the air in unison, their eyes flicking from shadow to shadow. They did not know where the danger lay, but instinct told them it was near. From the cover of ferns the Gorgosaurus watched. Its chest rose and fell in steady rhythm. Patience had already fed it many times. It had learned to wait for the perfect moment, rather than waste strength in reckless charges. Tonight, the scent of weakness drove it forward. The herd stirred and shifted, but within their mass lay the one that could not escape. The hunter moved with careful grace. Each step pressed into soft soil, leaving only the faintest imprint. Its tail countered each movement, balancing its great body as it slid through shadow. It did not rush. To reveal itself too soon would bring chaos. The herd would scatter, and the weak might slip away within the storm of running bodies. Minutes stretched into what felt like hours. The moon cast pale light through shifting clouds. A breeze rose and carried the predator's scent forward. The herd stiffened. Heads lifted. Breath grew sharp. The wall of adults tightened around the young. The Gorgosaurus froze. Stillness was as much a weapon as teeth. If it moved, now it would fail. The wind shifted again, turning toward the east. Relief swept through the herd. Some lowered their heads to graze on low plants, while others drank from the shallow pools left near the clearing. The moment of tension passed, though faint unease lingered. For the Gorgosaurus, the delay only sharpened hunger. Its eyes narrowed. The weak target still limped, and weakness could not be hidden. The hunter began again. This time it moved in an arc to the left. It would strike from where the trees opened slightly. The herd would attempt to flee toward the right, and in their rush the young would fall behind. The plan was written not by thought, but by instinct shaped across millions of years. Suddenly the night cracked with sound. From deeper in the forest came shrill cries, high and sharp. The herd bolted in alarm, their wall breaking apart. Not from the Gorgosaurus, but from another threat. A pack of dromaeosaurs burst into view. Their bodies small yet fast, their sickle claws gleaming in the pale light. They leapt toward the herd, slashing at flanks, driving panic through the clearing. The Gorgosaurus growled low, a sound that vibrated the ground. It had been moments away from its strike, but the smaller hunters had ruined the plan. The herd thundered away in a storm of hooves, tails, and cries. Dust rose from the ground. The limping hadrosaur stumbled, yet still pressed forward, surrounded by fleeing kin. The dromaeosaurs leapt onto the backs of larger prey, snapping and tearing before being shaken off. They worked as a unit, each strike designed to weaken and tire. Their strength was in numbers, their speed in coordination. For the Gorgosaurus, they were thieves. This was its hunt, not theirs. With a roar that split the night, the predator stormed from the shadows. Its body surged forward in a blur of muscle and fury. The dromaeosaurs scattered at once, their calls sharp with alarm. They knew better than to stand against a giant. They vanished into trees, their small forms melting into darkness, as if they had never been there at all. The herd had fled far across the clearing, but one sound reached the hunter's ears. The limp. The young hadrosaur fell behind, struggling to keep pace. Its breath wheezed, its gait uneven. The Gorgosaurus locked on. Its legs drove against the earth, propelling it in pursuit. Each stride carried it closer, its shadow stretching long under the moon. The young hadrosaur cried out as it stumbled. Its body struck the ground and scrambled in panic. Dust rose around it. The herd was gone, leaving it alone, exposed. The hunter closed in jaws wide. Teeth gleamed with the reflection of the moon. Impact came with brutal force. The Gorgosaurus struck its prey, and the cries ended in silence, broken only by the sound of tearing flesh. The predator fed swift and relentless, ripping muscle from bone, swallowing chunks with shaking power. The night absorbed the violence, as it always had. The herd would survive. The hunter would live another day. Balance held, yet the kill drew attention. The smell of blood rolled across the land, carried by the wind. Crocodiles stirred in the nearby river, sliding silently toward the source. Insects swarmed thick upon the air, drawn to the feast. Even the distant pack of dromaeosaurs circled wide, listening, waiting for a chance to return. The Gorgosaurus lifted its head. Blood streaked its jaws. Its eyes scanned the darkness. It knew the law. A kill was never safe. A meal could draw rivals, or worse. Survival was not only in the hunt, but in holding what had been won. With a heavy growl, it dragged the carcass deeper into cover beneath trees and ferns. Each motion was slow, deliberate, the weight of the kill straining even its strength. But the forest gave shelter. The cover of branches and vines shielded its prize from the open sky. The predator fed until its stomach swelled with fullness. Muscles relaxed as hunger faded. It lay near the kill, its head resting against the soil. Eyes half closed, yet still alert. Even in rest, danger lingered. Hours passed. The forest shifted from night to pale dawn. Sunlight cut through branches, lighting dew across leaves and spider webs. Birds wheeled overhead, their calls marking the change of time. The Gorgosaurus stirred and rose. It left the remains behind for scavengers who already waited in shadows. Life continued through death, feeding countless smaller lives. The predator moved back toward the river, its body heavy with food, yet steady. The world around it stirred with activity. Turtles slid into water. Pterosaurs swooped low across the surface. Hadrosaurs returned in cautious lines, their herds whispering with calls as they checked the air. The predator no longer needed them. It passed without rush. But survival was more than hunger. Territory needed to be held. Rivals needed to be challenged. Near the riverbank, tracks marked the soil. Large, deep prints set close together. Another predator had walked here. The scent still lingered, sharp and fresh. The Gorgosaurus lowered its head, sniffing the ground. The shape of the prints told a story. They belonged to a Dinosaur. Larger, heavier, slower, but powerful. A rival that would not hesitate to challenge if paths crossed. The air grew tense, though no enemy yet appeared. The Gorgosaurus moved along the tracks, its muscles stiff, its tail flicking. It did not seek battle, but it could not ignore the sign. To leave its territory undefended would invite weakness. The days stretched long, with heat pressing down on the land. The predator sought shade among high trees, its body sinking into cool earth. It rested, yet the memory of the rival's tracks burned in thoughtless instinct. A challenge was coming. The balance of the forest would shift. Far to the south, thunder rumbled. Dark clouds gathered heavy with storm. Winds bent trees and carried the promise of rain. Animals moved in restless waves, sensing the change. The Gorgosaurus rose, once more its body lit by flashes of lightning. It walked toward the ridges where the tracks had led. The air smelled of storm and danger. The sky cracked with thunder as storm clouds gathered like mountains above the plains. Rain began in scattered drops that darkened the soil, then quickly turned into sheets of water that washed across the land. Wind howled through grasses and bent trees until they creaked under strain. Lightning tore jagged scars through the clouds, painting the world in violent flashes of light. The storm had come, yet beneath it two predators faced one another, as if the chaos of the sky had been called to witness. The Gorgosaurus stepped onto the plain. Its body gleamed with rain that ran down its hide in streaks. Its chest rose and fell with steady power, though tension rippled through each muscle. Across the open space, the Daspletosaurus stood rooted like a dark tower. Heavier, broader, its jaws thick with crushing force. Both creatures were apex predators, yet the land was not wide enough for both. They circled at a distance at first. Neither rushed. Survival did not allow foolish charges. Each measured the other. The Gorgosaurus shifted on its long legs, its tail lashing against the wind. The Daspletosaurus lowered its head, releasing a growl that rolled like thunder across the plain. The storm answered with lightning above. The first move came sudden. The Gorgosaurus lunged forward in a blur, its claws striking the wet soil. It snapped its jaws toward the shoulder of its rival, but the Daspletosaurus twisted with surprising speed. Its massive skull swung wide and teeth crashed into the side of the Gorgosaurus with a sound that cut through the storm. Flesh tore and blood spilled into rain. The predator roared in fury, pulling away yet not retreating. Pain fueled it, but so did instinct. It darted left, circling, trying to use speed against the bulk of its rival. The Daspletosaurus pressed forward, each step heavy, each strike aimed to crush. Its jaws snapped close enough to rattle the air with each miss. The plain became a battleground, churned mud flying beneath their feet. Water sprayed with every strike. The Gorgosaurus leapt back, then forward again, lashing with teeth against the flank of its rival. This time its bite landed deep. Blood sprayed into the rain. The Daspletosaurus bellowed, shaking its body to tear free. Muscles strained. Flesh ripped. Both predators staggered apart, then lunged again, driven by the single law of survival. Lightning split the sky in a blinding arc. For a heartbeat, the world was frozen in white light. Two forms locked in combat, one sleek and swift, the other heavy and crushing. Then the thunder roared so loud the ground shook, and the storm drove harder, as if urging them on. The Gorgosaurus struck, low, aiming for the legs. Its teeth sank into muscle, and the Daspletosaurus stumbled. Mud splashed high as the giant nearly toppled, but its tail whipped sideways with brutal force. The strike slammed into the Gorgosaurus, knocking it rolling across the ground. Pain flared through its body, yet it pushed to its feet, snarling through blood and rain. Both predators heaved with exhaustion now, their bodies streaked with wounds, their breaths harsh and ragged. Neither could turn away. To yield was death. To fight was chance. Instinct pushed them forward once more. The Daspletosaurus charged its bulk, breaking through the storm like a living wall. The Gorgosaurus darted aside, yet claws raked across its side, leaving deep furrows. It answered with fury, snapping onto the throat of its rival. Teeth locked deep, the air filled with a choking roar. For long seconds a thrash locked together, rain pouring over them, lightning crashing above. With a violent shake, the Daspletosaurus tore free, blood pouring from its neck. It staggered but did not fall. Rage burned in its eyes, though its strength faltered. The Gorgosaurus crouched low, legs trembling, tail swaying to keep balance. Both predators circled again, each movement slower yet more deadly. The storm reached its height. Wind screamed across the plain, bending grasses flat. The river nearby swelled, bursting its banks with floods of brown water. Trees cracked in distant ridges. The earth itself seemed to tremble with the violence of sky and beast. The final strike came swift. The Gorgosaurus launched forward with every ounce of strength left in its body. It darted inside to guard the heavier rival jaws, snapping deep onto the torn neck once more. This time it did not release. It held with relentless force, shaking, pulling, tearing. Blood gushed warm against rain. The Daspletosaurus roared a sound of rage that turned to gurgling silence. Its legs buckled under its weight. It crashed to the mud with earth-shaking force. Silence fell within the storm. The only sound was rain striking ground and the heavy panting of the victor. The Gorgosaurus stood above its fallen rival, jaws dripping with blood and water. Its body quivered from pain and exhaustion, yet its eyes burned with life. It had endured. It had survived. The storm began to break. Thunder rolled further away. Rain softened into steady rhythm. Clouds parted to reveal slivers of moon and stars beyond. The plain lay torn with deep tracks and pools of blood washed in by water. The body of the Daspletosaurus rested. Still, its rule ended in that moment. The Gorgosaurus stood over the field of battle, swaying with fatigue, yet unbroken. Wounds marked its hide, but victory pulsed through every breath. The storm had tested it, the rival had challenged it, yet survival had chosen. The land belonged once more to the swift hunter, the sharp shadow that ruled the forest and plains. Above, the clouds cleared further. The first light of dawn touched the horizon, painting the wet grasses in silver. Birds cried out from distant trees. The world moved on as it always, and yet in that hour one truth remained clear. The Gorgosaurus had proven itself not just a hunter, not just a survivor, but the sovereign of its time. The climax of struggle faded into silence. The storm gave way to stillness. The predator lifted its head toward the light, and with a deep growl, it walked forward, leaving the fallen behind. The storm had passed, yet its memory lingered across the land. Water pooled in every hollow. The plains shone wet under pale dawnlight. Branches torn from trees floated in swollen rivers. Birds shook rain from their wings and lifted into the fresh morning air. Life stirred once more as if no battle had been fought, no storm had torn across the sky. Yet scars remained. The Daspletosaurus lay silent in the mud, its massive body still. Scavengers had already gathered. Small mammals emerged from burrows, noses twitching. Winged reptiles circled above, waiting for the giant's flesh to cool. Insects swarmed in clouds, their hum filling the air. Death was never wasted here. What one predator lost, countless others would gain. The Gorgosaurus did not linger near its fallen rival. Wounds ached along its flanks where claws and teeth had torn deep. Blood mixed with mud across its hide. Every step brought pain, yet every breath carried triumph. It had stood against storm and rival and endured. For now that was enough. It moved toward the ridges where the forest rose dense and green. Each step pressed heavy prints into the wet soil. Muscles shivered with fatigue, but instinct guided it forward. Shelter was needed. Time was needed. Healing would decide if victory became survival, or if wounds would invite weakness that others might claim. The forest welcomed it with cool shade and the sound of dripping leaves. Streams trickled through undergrowth, carrying rain toward the wide river below. Birds called from high branches, and lizards darted across wet bark. The Gorgosaurus pushed deeper until the shadows wrapped around it. It lowered its body against the earth and rested. Breath came slow, eyes half closed. Its chest rose and fell like the steady beat of the world itself. Days passed. Rain returned in lighter showers, feeding the forest and swelling the rivers. The predator healed slowly. Wounds closed into scars. Flies gathered, yet were brushed away with heavy shakes of the head and tail. The Gorgosaurus rose often to drink from streams, and once to chase a careless reptile that strayed too close. It did not yet hunt large prey, but it endured on smaller catches, and the strength stored from its last meal. Patience was survival. Healing was survival. The land too healed. Grass straightened after being flattened by wind. Mud hardened into soil once more. The storm's rage was already fading into memory. Life returned in full rhythm. Herds of hadrosaurs crossed the plains again, their voices carrying in low calls that echoed through the ridges. Triceratops moved in heavy lines, their horns sharp against the morning sun. Above them, flocks of flying reptiles drifted on rising currents of air. The age of giants marched on. The Gorgosaurus rose stronger with each day. Its stride steadied, its eyes sharpened. Hunger returned with fierce demand. The forest no longer offered enough. It moved again toward open ground drawn by the call of prey. It followed game trails marked by deep prints and broken plants. It listened to distant calls carried by wind. Every sense awakened to the hunt once more. On the edge of the river, plain it paused. The world stretched wide before it. Herds grazed far in the distance. The river glittered under sunlight, its waters high from the storm. Crocodiles basked along its banks, their jaws open to the heat. Small creatures scurried through reeds. Balance returned as if nothing had changed. Yet everything had. The predator that stood now was scarred, stronger, tempered by battle and storm. A herd of hadrosaurs shifted near the far bank. Their calls rolled in deep notes. Among them, young moved clumsy yet full of life. The Gorgosaurus lowered its body, scanning with sharp gaze. It did not strike. Not yet. It measured. It waited. Patience once more. The cycle had returned. The predator healed the land, restored the prey alert. Life continued in rhythm endless as the rivers that cut through the earth. The fallen Daspletosaurus had become part of that cycle, feeding smaller lives until only bone would remain. The storm had reshaped the land, yet already new growth rose in its wake. Time did not pause. As the sun dipped low, the Gorgosaurus turned from the herd. Hunger would drive it soon enough, but now it walked the riverbank steady and strong. Its shadow stretched long across the water. Each step echoed a truth older than storms, older than rivals, older than even the earth itself. Life endured through struggle. Death gave way to survival. And the hunter's rule continued not in cruelty, but in balance. Night came soft across the forest. Stars lit the sky in countless sparks. The predator lay beneath trees, resting once more. Its breath slowed into deep rhythm. Around it the forest sang with the endless voices of insects, frogs, and distant birds. Darkness held no fear. It was a creature of darkness and light both. The Gorgosaurus slept secure in its place within the great circle of life. For generations more it would hunt. For generations more it would rule these forests and plains. One day it too would fall, as all creatures must. Yet in this moment it lived strong. It carried the story of struggle etched in scars across its hide. It walked as a shadow among giants. It endured where others fell. And so the resolution settled across the land. The storm had broken. The rival had fallen. The Gorgosaurus had risen. Balance was restored. The cycle continued. The sun set in a blaze of red and gold across the horizon. Shadows stretched long across the plains as night claimed the sky. Stars shimmered above like ancient eyes watching the world below. The Gorgosaurus stood at the edge of the forest, its body, still, its eyes glowing faint in the dim light. Around it the land pulsed with life. Herds moved in quiet lines. Rivers sang with endless motion. Forests whispered with hidden voices. All of it bound together in one cycle of survival. The predator lowered its head and drank from a stream. Water rippled around its muzzle, carrying reflections of sky and tree. Scars traced its hide, reminders of battles. Endured storms, faced rivals defeated. Each mark told a story not of cruelty, but of balance. Each mark spoke of survival in a world where strength was the only truth. It lifted its head once more, and the air carried sense of prey near and far. Hunger stirred, but so did patience. The Gorgosaurus moved back into the forest, its steps silent, its form swallowed by shadow. It vanished into the world that had shaped it and that it shaped in return. Time would pass. The land itself would change. Rivers would carve new paths. Forests would fall and rise again. Storms would come and fade. New creatures would walk the earth. Yet for this moment, for this age, the Gorgosaurus ruled. Its legacy was not written in words or stone, but in every choice of survival, in every heartbeat that carried it forward. To those who would one day find its bones, the story might seem distant. They would give a name, they would place it within history. They would see it as a monster of tooth and claw. Yet here within its time it was life itself. A hunter not of cruelty, but of necessity. A ruler not of conquest, but of balance. And as the night deepened and the stars wheeled above the land, the truth remained unbroken. The world belonged to the strong, yet strength was more than power. It was patience, it was endurance, it was survival. The Gorgosaurus embodied them all. Its age had not ended. Its story would echo long after silence.